Recording in progress.
Yeah, so we were discussing how a global orderliness and living with resolution in all dimensions of our life is something that is naturally desirable to all humans and is naturally acceptable to all humans. And so, in that sense, we all have, and that itself is humanness. Living in this orderliness itself is humanness. And that itself, that the fact that it is naturally acceptable and desirable to all humans since time immemorial is evidence of the fact that the seed for humanness is present with us. Because the seed is there, because we have the capacity for it and we have the desire for it. So we can't really get rid of it. Somewhere or the other, we keep seeking it, and until we, achieve this capacity to live with resolution in all dimensions of our living. And that was what we were talking about last time, and now he's going to start talking about the processes of the Jeevan's activities again. So we had already done from Chintan up till resolve, so contemplation up till resolve. Now he's going to start talking about what happens after resolve.
जो सामान्य आकांक्षा महत्व उसके स्थान पर हम प्रामाणिकता के लिए चित्रण किया। संकल्प के पश्चात आता है चित्रण।
So after resolve comes imagination. So if you imagine the table of the Jeevan, you'll remember that the outward activities are first in the Atma, there is authenticity or evidence. Then in the Buddhi, there is resolve. And in the Chit, there is imagination. These are the outward activities. The inward activities are different for each of these. So the outward activity after resolve is imagination.
जो संकल्प हुआ उसके अनुसार जीने की कला के लिए चित्रण स्वाभाविक रूप में चित्त में होता है और वो जो अभी तक जो हुई।
So whatever resolve we have taken, we then use our imagination to figure out how to live according to it.
जो संकल्प हुआ उसके अनुसार जीने की कला के लिए चित्रण स्वाभाविक रूप में चित्त में होता है।
So then this imagination on how to live according to our resolve occurs naturally in our चित्त।
और वो जो अभी तक जो हुई थी संवेदनाओं के आधार पर जीने की कला के लिए चित्रण होती थी, उसके स्थान पर हम प्रामाणिकता पूर्वक जीने की कला का चित्रण होना आरंभ होता है। उसका
So up till now, all the imagination that we would do for the art of living was based on our sensations, on our bodily sensations. So all the imagination regarding how to live was based on our bodily sensations. Now, instead of that, the imagination will be in accordance with authenticity, with evidence of realization.
स्वरूप है उपकार विधि चित्रण होना आरंभ होता है। उसका स्वरूप है उपकार विधि। उपकार विधि से जब हम हमारे जो सामान्य आकांक्षा महत्वाकांक्षाओं को चित्रित करते हैं, उस समय में यही निकलती है हम स्वयं स्वायत्त रूप में समझदार होते हैं, परिवार में स्वायत्तता के रूप।
And the form that living takes is the mechanism of benevolence, the MO of benevolence. And how that happens is that let me just listen again.
विधि उपकार विधि से जब हम हमारे जो सामान्य आकांक्षा महत्वाकांक्षाओं को चित्रित करते हैं, उस समय में यही निकलती है हम स्वयं स्वायत्त रूप में समझदार होते हैं, परिवार में स्वायत्तता के रूप में हम समाधान समृद्धि को प्रमाणित किए रहते हैं, तभी हम उपकार करने योग्य होते हैं।
So when we start to imagine our basic aspirations and higher aspirations via this approach of benevolence, what we realize is that it is only when we become autonomously knowledgeable and become autonomously prosperous in our family that we become capable of doing benevolence in society.
ऐसी योग्यता को हम कहीं छुपा नहीं पाते हैं, वह स्वाभाविक रूप में उपकार के लिए नियोजित होती है।
And such a capability of benevolence is something that cannot be hidden. It automatically becomes active and becomes active in society.
ऐसी उपकार विधि से हम हमारा सामान्य आकांक्षा, महत्वाकांक्षाओं को हम चित्रित कर पाते हैं। यह वो निश्चित रूप में एक सीमा में सिमट आती है।
So in such an approach of benevolence, when we imagine our basic needs and our higher needs, they automatically become quite limited.
हमारे आवश्यकताएं सीमित हो जाते हैं, संभावनाएं अधिक हो जाते हैं।
So our needs become limited and the possibilities exceed the needs.
इस सूत्र से पूरा माने आवर्तनशील अर्थशास्त्र अपने में निहित है, समीचीन है, मनुष्य उसको समझ सकता है।
And based on this principle, the entire cyclical economics is very possible. It is innate and humans can understand it. So what he says is that when our imagination is being directed by realization, what happens is realization is of coexistence. Coexistence means togetherness. So when that is happening, that is directing our imagination, our art of living that emerges in our imagination will always be governed by the principle of benevolence, of giving, of sharing, because what we have realized in existence is that existence is coexistence, existence is togetherness. And realizing that means we will also be aligned to that togetherness, to that giving, to that participating and contributing. So that when in living, that translates to benevolence. So when that happens, now before this has happened, when we imagine how to go about living, we come up with plans on how to fulfill our needs, how to run what our lifestyle should be, what our family should be like, and how to fulfill the needs of both ourselves and our family. And so these needs are basic needs and higher needs, which has already been discussed. But right now, when we are living, we have no solid basis on what our basic needs are, how much, and for what they will be used. So therefore, it has often been observed that our needs are infinite, our needs are unlimited, because a certain situation requires this, that time this is our need, then our body gives us a sensation, no, I feel like having this, that becomes our need. So, our bodies keep giving us different sensations and we keep feeling like, oh, I'll need this also right now. I need this also. Maybe in the future, I'll need the other third thing. And it's just similar to me, all my other family members are in the same boat. So their needs are also quite indeterminate and they keep changing. And therefore, we feel like actually the needs are greater. It's not that our needs are greater, the needs are just indeterminate. Some days I feel like eating certain things, other days I feel like eating something else. That means it's indeterminate, not that I have greater needs, because the amount of food I can consume is still limited only. So what he's saying is, right now, because all of our imagination of how to fulfill our needs is driven by the body, it is indeterminate and unlimited. But when our imagination gets determined by our realization and its authenticity, then our basic principle of functioning becomes not our body, but the principle of benevolence, of giving to society and to each other. And when that determines our imagination, we realize that that is only possible when I am knowledgeable and living with my knowledge, and when I am prosperous, that is producing autonomously prosperous, that is producing more than the needs of my family. Then I can then participate in society and give openly in society. When I have more than the needs of my family, then I can give out of that. And when we realize these things, when we start, aligning our imagination to this sort of a lifestyle, then we realize, see, since my aim is to be participative and contributive in society, then that kind of determines all my needs. So the needs for my nutrition, my shelter, my clothing, and that of my family also gets aligned according to that objective. That the objective is to participate in society and to give in society. And so that automatically limits our needs. And because we have the capacity to produce, we have resolution, we have much more capability to produce than the needs that remain.
और जागृति के पश्चात समझ में
And that is the principle for cyclical economics. It is not minimalism. It is not maximizing production. It is identifying the limits of our needs and being able to produce more than that, and which can only happen for the end of contributing in society. So economics cannot be separated from our social systems, our psychological principles also. My aim has to be to contribute in society. Only then can my economics be cyclical.
में आता ही है, इस मनुष्य उसको समझ सकता है और जागृति के पश्चात समझ में आता ही है.
So this such cyclical economics is innate and humans can understand it, and after realization it is easily understood, naturally understood by us.
इसमें कोई शंका ही नहीं है. इस ढंग से हम आवर्तनशील अर्थव्यवस्था के साथ, अर्थ का मतलब है तन मन धन, इन
So there is no doubt about the fact that it can easily be understood upon realization. Now, what is this cyclical economics? That cyclical economic system is about our resources, which is the resources are our body, our mind, and our body, and our wealth.
आवर्तनशील अर्थव्यवस्था के साथ, अर्थ का मतलब है तन मन धन, इन तीनों के संयोजन से हम हर जगह में नियोजित हो जाए. जैसा उत्पादन में नियोजित हो जाए, व्यवहार में नियोजित हो जाए, व्यवस्था में नियोजित.
So economic system is about our resources. Now resources are our mind, our body, and our wealth, and it is with the combination of these three that we are able to participate in any activity, whether it is a participation in production activity, whether it is a participation in behavior, human behavior, or
उत्पादन में नियोजित हो जाए, व्यवहार में नियोजित हो जाए, व्यवस्था में नियोजित हो,
or in participating in the larger order. It is in combination of these three. We will be applying our mind, our body, and some physical wealth also.
हो जाए. और शिक्षा में तो नियोजित करते ही हैं, ये करना ही है. इस ढंग से मनुष्य को सभी ओर नियोजित होने की अवसर बना ही है.
And of course, we naturally utilize all of these in education. And in this way, it is possible for any of us, for all of us, to utilize our resources in any way.
से मनुष्य को सभी ओर नियोजित होने की अवसर बना ही है. और उन अवसरों को सटीक उपयोग करने की विधि स्वयं स्फूर्त विधि से आती है.
And so we all have the opportunity to utilize these resources in any way, and the ability to utilize. So we have the opportunity, but the ability to utilize them emerges in a spontaneous, automatic, voluntary way in us.
अभी भी भ्रमित अवस्था में भी इन सभी आयामों में अपने अपने नियोजन के लिए प्रयत्न करता है, किंतु ये देखा गया कुछ समय के पश्चात मनुष्य जब शिक्षा को प्राप्त करने के बाद, प्रचलित शिक्षा को प्राप्त करने के बाद, वह सदा सदा के लिए और उत्पादन कार्य से विमुख होना चाहता है।
So we have the opportunity naturally, and the ability also emerges automatically in human beings. And this has been seen even in delusioned humans, that we have the ability to automatically in a self-driven, self-motivated way, utilize these three resources at our disposal in any direction that we wish. Although it has been seen that in the delusioned human, upon attaining this sort of prevalent education, after going through the prevalent education system, we gradually become disenchanted with the utilization of our resources for production.
परिश्रम से कतराना चाहता है और उसके बदले में ज्यादा से ज्यादा संग्रह सुविधा के लिए तृषित होता हुआ
become not, what's the word, vimukh hona, to become repulsed basically. After undergoing the current education, the prevalent education system, we become repulsed from production, we become repulsed from physical effort, and become more and more inclined, disinclined is the word, more and more inclined towards resource accumulation and consumption.
और उसके बदले में ज्यादा से ज्यादा संग्रह सुविधा के लिए तृषित होता हुआ देखने को मिला।
More and more thirsty for resource accumulation.
ये अधिकांश पढ़े लिखे लोगों में इसको देखा गया।
This has been seen in the majority of educated individuals today.
कोई कोई तो दोनों पक्ष में रहते हैं, ये भी होना चाहिए वो भी होना चाहिए, और किंतु अधिकांश लोग ऐसे हैं।
Some people do remain in both with both frame mindsets, that we should have production as well as resource accumulation. However, the majority are only craving for resource accumulation.
ये बात पर भी ध्यान देने की आवश्यकता रहे।
This is also something that has been worth paying attention to.
जब हमारा चित्रण अर्थात चित्त में होने वाली चित्रण हम जो सुखपूर्वक जीने के लिए क्या विधि बनी, हम जागृति पूर्वक व्यवस्था में और मानवतापूर्ण विधि से जीने के लिए चित्रित करते हैं।
Okay, so here basically he is placing the role of imagination in the human being, which is, I find, quite interesting, because imagination has been thought of in many ways. Humans seem to be unique because we have imagination, and we have thought that the role of this imagination can be vast and varied. Here he is, without actually going into what it is not for, he is placing the actual role of this capacity of ours, this imagination of ours. He's saying that our faculty of imagination is to be able to imagine how to participate in society in a multifaceted way, how to come up with ways of participating in society in orderliness, in the larger system. That is what imagination is meant for. That is what will feel satisfying therefore will feel satisfying to the imagination. Right now, popularly, we often think of a lot of other ways of utilizing our imagination, and sure, we can. For instance, we can employ our imagination to come up with some work of art. But if that work of art is not towards living in orderliness in society, it will not feel satisfying to us, because that is not what imagination is trying to do, is meant to do.
जब हमारा चित्रण अर्थात चित्त में होने वाली चित्रण हम जो सुखपूर्वक जीने के लिए क्या विधि बनी, हम
So when our imagination, that means our imagination which is that lies within our chit, it starts to function for happiness. What is the method or mechanism that we have developed to live in happiness?
जागृति पूर्वक व्यवस्था में और मानवतापूर्ण विधि से जीने के लिए चित्रित करते हैं। हमारा सामान्य आकांक्षाएं और महत्वाकांक्षाएं संयत हो जाते हैं। मैंने थोड़ी सी
So when we imagine, so the way to living with happiness is when we imagine, when we use our imagination to figure out how to live in orderliness, that is when we are able to
पूर्ण विधि से जीने के लिए चित्रित करते हैं। हमारा सामान्य आकांक्षाएं और महत्वाकांक्षाएं संयत हो जाते हैं। मैंने थोड़ी सी साधन से ही हमको दूर दूर तक हमारा काम कार्य व्यवहार संपन्न हो जाता है।
So yes, when we use our imagination to live in orderliness with humaneness, that is with beneficence and wanting to contribute and participate, we find that our basic needs and our higher needs both become very limited. That means that with just a little bit of resource, we're able to go very far.
ये भी देखा गया।
So this has also been seen.
इस विधि से हम व्यवहारिक चित्रण यहीं से शुरू होती है।
So in this way, this is the point from which behavioral imagination begins. Behavioral here means that which pertains to our everyday living and participating in society and as a human being.
तो यदि इसमें ये भी आक्षेप आता है क्या अभी तक अव्यवहारिक रहा?
So now another akshep, another question that is raised on this point is that has our imagination up till now been non-behavioral?
व्यवहारिक इस विधि से रहा, प्रमाणित हो चुकी है, व्यवस्था के अर्थ में अव्यवहारिक रहा।
So it has been non-behavioral in the sense, and this has also been evidenced, that it has been non-behavioral in terms of living in orderliness. That means our imagination has not contributed, has actually taken us further away from living in orderliness, has been unable to facilitate our living in orderliness. In that sense, it has been non-behavioral, because behavioral is that which facilitates participating in order, in orderliness.
समाधान के अर्थ में अव्यवहारिक रहा, प्रामाणिकता के अर्थ में अव्यवहारिक रहा।
So it has been non-behavioral in terms of participating in orderliness. It has been non-behavioral in terms of resolution, because it has not been able to provide resolution. It has been non-behavioral in terms of authenticity or evidencing truth. It's not our truth or my truth or your truth. Authenticity is truth. So our imagination has been incapable of evidencing authenticity.
न्याय के अर्थ में अव्यवहारिक रहा।
It has been non-behavioral in terms of justice.
नियम के अर्थ में अव्यवहारिक रहा।
It has been non-behavioral in terms of laws, natural laws.
संतुलन के अर्थ में अव्यवहारिक रहा।
It has been non-behavioral in terms of balance. Now, after this long list, it becomes quite evident that actually whatever we have considered to be behavioral was not behavioral imagination, was not actually behavioral, because it remained incapable of living in lawfulness in the sense of understanding and living according to the laws of existence, of living in a balanced way in nature, of living with justice, of living with resolution, of living with authenticity, of living with resolution, of living with in orderliness. So our imaginations have been incapable of doing any of this up till now. In that sense, they have not been behavioral up until realization.
इतने मुद्दों में अव्यवहारिक है आज तक.
So it has been non-behavioral in so many issues up till this date.
आगे जैसा भी हो जाए, आप हमारी इच्छा है, जैसा बनता है बनाते जाएंगे, ये हमको विश्वास है.
Now, whatever happens in the future, it is up to our desires. Whatever we make of it is what will happen in the future.
ये व्यवहारिक अव्यवहारिकता की बात कहा. अब होना क्या चाहिए? हम
So this was regarding behavioral and non-behavioral. Now, what should happen? What ought to happen?
को व्यवस्था में व्यवहारिक रहना है, व्यवहार में व्यवहारिक रहना है, नियम में व्यवहारिक रहना है, नियंत्रण में व्यवहारिक रहना.
So we have to remain behavioral in order, in the larger order systems. We have to remain behavioral in our behavior, that is our one-to-one interpersonal interactions among human beings. We have to remain behavior in natural regulation. We have to remain behavioral.
रहना है, नियम में व्यवहारिक रहना है, नियंत्रण में व्यवहारिक रहना है और संतुलन में व्यवहारिक रहना है. इन सभी
And we have to remain behavioral in the existential laws. We have to remain behavioral in existential regulation and behavioral in existential balance. Balanced living, regulated living and lawful living.
आयामों में हम संतुलित रहने का प्रमाण परिवार में हम माने व्यवहारिक रहना है.
So remaining behavioral in all these dimensions, that means the evidence of living in a balanced way in all these dimensions is to remain sorry, let me just hear the last
का प्रमाण परिवार में हम माने व्यवहारिक रहना है और समाज में व्यवहारिक रहना है, अस्तित्व में सहअस्तित्व के रूप में हम व्यवहारिक रहना.
So the remaining behavioral in law, regulation, balance, justice, and resolution, all of that means that we will also remain behavioral in our families, remain behavioral in the societies, and remain behavioral in existence as a whole. Behavioral here, think of it as participative, actually functional and participative.
यही मनुष्य की चुटकी में आने वाली बात है.
This much is what actually humans have to, this much is that grain of understanding that humans must pick up on.
ये बात यदि चुटकी में आती है, मनुष्य स्वयं स्फूर्त विधि से प्रयत्न भी करेगा. ये नहीं आएगा, वो अपने स्वयं स्फूर्त विधि से प्रयत्न करेगा नहीं.
So if we can pick up on this much, then human beings will naturally, automatically attempt to work towards this on their own. If they don't understand this much, if they don't pick up on this much, then they will not attempt to work on this. And what is it that has to be understood? What has to be picked up on? That we need to become behavioral in all of these dimensions. In our living, our imagination, our imagination needs to successfully be able to function in all of these dimensions.
ये भी हम अच्छी तरह से जांच चुका हूं.
So this is also something that I have thoroughly examined and verified.
इसका तात्पर्य क्या हुआ? इसका तात्पर्य ये हुआ, अभी तत्काल जो प्रयत्न करने वाले व्यक्तियों का मूल्यांकन हुआ.
So what does this imply? This implies that this is actually an evaluation of all those peoples who are presently attempting to understand existence. So it is an immediate evaluation of everyone trying to attempt to understand something, this entire thing.
जिनको ये चुटकी में आती है तत्काल प्रयत्नशील होते हैं, इसको मैंने देखा है.
So anyone who picks up on this point becomes immediately inclined, becomes immediately active in working towards it. This is something that I have seen.
इसको परखा है, इसका प्रमाण हमारे पास मौजूद है.
This is something I have seen, this is something I have tested, and I have the evidence of this with me.
इसके बाद आगे की बात आती है लोकव्यापीकरण क्रम में. एक आदमी जो आज सद्य प्रयत्नशील हुआ.
And beyond that comes the next point, which is in the sequence of publicizing this, which is
लोकव्यापीकरण क्रम में एक आदमी जो आज सद्य प्रयत्नशील हुआ, जो आज नहीं हुए थे वो कल होने की संभावना बनाए रहता है.
which is that there are some people who are inclined or who are actively working towards this today, but out of those who are not immediately inclined and working towards this today, they still hold the possibility of becoming inclined tomorrow. That remains with them.
इस ढंग से हम सबसे जुड़े हुए हैं, ये बात को ध्यान दिलाने की आवश्यकता है.
In this way, we are all still, we remain connected with everyone. And this is something that I found was necessary to draw attention to.
इस विधि से हम अपने ही जीवन की महिमा से हम व्यवस्था में जीने की और व्यवहार में जीने की चित्रण को हम कर लेते हैं. फलस्वरूप सुखपूर्वक जीने की बात निरंतर बना ही रहता है.
So in this way, by virtue of the significance of our own jivans, we come up with the imagination on how to live in orderliness and how to live in relationships, in behavior with one another. And in that way, we come up with the way to live with happiness.
ये निरंतर बनाए रहने का मतलब जब तक शरीर को हम कर लेते हैं, फलस्वरूप सुखपूर्वक जीने की बात निरंतर बना ही रहता है.
Right, so we are able to imagine how to live in orderliness and in relationships, and consequently, living with happiness becomes an eternal constant for us.
ये निरंतर बनाए रहने का मतलब जब तक शरीर काल है तब तक सुखपूर्वक जीने की सारे विधियां, सारा उपाय, सारा नीति, सारा व्यवस्था बन जाती है.
And what do I mean by eternal over here? Here, he's saying, here it's referring to until the body remains, we have all the policies, all the solutions, all the tricks and all the mechanisms on how to live with happiness. Because the imagination in the chit is involved in living. Living is with the body. Therefore, eternal for the imagination is until the body exists. So that is the limit of the imagination's eternality. For the buddhi and the atma, eternal is actually eternal, regardless of the body.
इस विधि से चित्रण का सार्थकता समझ में आया.
So in this way, we have understood the meaningfulness of our imagination, our force of imagination, our faculty of imagination.
चिंतन का जो सार्थकता है, न्याय धर्म सत्य का साक्षात्कार ही चिंतन का सार्थक स्वरूप है. ये पहले ही निष्कर्ष निकल चुकी है.
The meaningfulness of chintan, which is the inward activity of the chit, So the meaningfulness of contemplation, sorry, not chintan, is to understand um, uh, law, regulation, balance, justice, resolution, and truth, justice, order, and truth. That is something we have already discussed previously. And now we have discussed the meaningfulness of the chitran, the outward activity of the chitran.
इसके बाद ये जो चित्रण हुई उसके अनुसार विश्लेषण स्वाभाविक है.
After this, whatever imagination we have come up with, now the analysis based on such an imagination is natural. So that is the next step of what happens in the vritti. So I suppose we can do that tomorrow. We have about 15 minutes left. So if there are any thoughts or questions or something, we can discuss those. Anything about what we discussed today? It was about the process of imagination that is happening in the chit of the Jeevan.
So is he saying, Krishna, that if we understand like coexistence and Jeevan and the activities and also the principles of living harmoniously, if we understand all these things, whatever is needed to be understood, then the imagination will get aligned automatically by that understanding? Like, is that?
Yeah. It's not that, it becomes automatically sounds strange to me. It naturally aligns because, you are doing it yourself in the sense that you've realized something. So naturally you want to be authentic to that realization of truth. And so naturally you resolve to live according to it. So naturally you will imagine in accordance with that resolve. In that sense.
Right. And so in the meantime, like if we haven't understood, then either we can follow our bodies, but is it possible to follow something else? Like, like how we obey a teaching or we obey
Hi.
Yeah.
खुल गया दरवाजा देखो.
Oh, Manji. Huh. Yeah. So until a realization of coexistence has become imbibed in us for ourselves, as our own, we don't have that as a basis to be living according to orient our imagination according to, but we can orient it according to whatever we have understood in line with that. Because see, if it makes sense to us that existence is an orderly system in which everything is functioning together, dancing with one another, contributing, complementing one another naturally, and I am also part of that, and that is also where my fulfillment and all of our fulfillment lies, even with whatever our surfacey level of understanding that itself aligns our imagination. And that is why, to whatever extent we understand orderliness in nature, to whatever extent we understand, say, laws or natural regulation or natural balance in systems or justice in relationships, etc., to that extent, our imagination automatically does align. So for instance, now, if someone has understood cyclicity in natural cycles, when they have to say produce some food, say they have to cook, they have to choose what to cook in their kitchen, they will naturally choose ingredients and products that fit within that cycle. And then when there is waste produced from our house, they'll naturally feel inclined to figure out how to manage that waste so that it re-enters a cycle of nature. So, that is something we already see happening, even those who maybe are not thinking of existence as coexistence in this sense. But to whatever extent we recognize lawfulness and balance in nature, our imagination does align to that. So that's why he's saying it's evidence when we recognize our uh, our desire to function according to natural laws and principles and participate and complement and be cyclical. All of that is evidence of the fact that we have picked up on the point that that is what existence is all about.
Right, right. Yeah, that's quite beautiful actually. That makes sense to me because it's like a feedback that you get, right? That actually, yes, I have got this, and I'm, my inclination is towards living in that way,
Yeah,
and I'm living that way.
yeah. And the feedback is an important part of that, actually. That point is really important because actually, when you start living that way, then you realize just how large and integrated the system is that you can't just change a little bit of it. You start out, of course, with just a little bit because your imagination is still kind of exercising those muscles. But then you realize just how integrated it is. You can't just, compost your wet waste and solve the problem. It is about, at the end of the day, you realize, oh no, it has to be about my relationships with my family and with the people around me and the systems that we come to create. All of that is part of even my trying to dispose of my household wet waste properly. So we won't come to realize that until we take feedback on what we are doing.
Look what all he picked up. See what all he grabbed in his mouth.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. I muted you because I thought you were talking to someone else. Now you'll have to unmute yourself, Manjuji.
He did. My dog made such a racket.
Oh.
And I want to say something, then I have to. Anyway.
Oh, okay. We didn't hear your dog, but you can say something now. Now we hear you.
No, it's something like what he's saying today, he said before, and we heard it, no? That kind. No, that's all I'm saying.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, if he's it's on the same point and different angles.
Yeah, today he is talking specifically about what our imagination does. Yeah, what its role is.
What is actually its role was to be, probably.
Yeah. And that, up till now, our imagination has not been fulfilling that role.
It goes anywhere. We call it mind and thought, and
yeah,
it goes anywhere. Yeah. So, is there a difference between imagination and the mind?
So, depends on what we are calling the mind. Mind is just a word. Often we refer to anything that is happening inside of us, any sort of mental process, we call it the mind, usually. So, if you take it in that sense, then you could say that imagination is just one part of our mind. There are 10 parts to it.
Yeah. Okay. But this is very new, no? This is how he thinks, this is how it is. That means that imagination has a purpose.
Yeah, that is the really new part.
Otherwise, we always took imagination as a little gift that came along to an artist or to a painter or to, a designer.
Even children, anyone actually. Yeah. Yeah, we think of it as a faculty that can, add on sort of thing, which we can do anything with. Like, there's no pamphlet associated with it. No instruction manual.
Yeah. So while you were speaking that, I was saying, chopping my tree, lopping my trees, and then taking care of the garden. That's all from my imagination.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, is it harming anything? And is it like this? Is how my my imagination was going when I was listening to this.
Right, exactly. No, even I've just been doing all the sort of pruning and
Mm.
all in my garden, and my imagination was also running there. Like to imagine, what should be removed, where should it go, how can it fit into some other cycle,
Mm.
given that we
Mm.
don't live in a, farm right now.
Mm.
How do all these systems fit in?
Uh, and
That,
then and then we've been picking up, earthworms from the street. In the morning, the
ah,
poor things all come out to die, and the cows just go over them. So we've been picking up earthworms. Of course, we can't pick up all. We pick up a few. While walking the dog, one person goes to pick up, and then we put them in our compost bin. Pick
great.
and all that. So today the compost bin was coming, we were unthinking, and then these worms have become so nice and fat because they didn't have to look for food.
Oh,
So
lovely.
all that. So this is all imagination. I'll do this, So I mean,
Yeah.
is it useful or is it in line, aligned, or it's useless or what? I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Also, and then you also realize how much knowledge you also need to be able to have an imagination that can function in this direction. Like, for
Oh,
instance, you need to know that earthworms are actually desirable in your compost pile. And then
mm,
another bit of information is that actually earthworms, they they don't have any Jeevan in them. A. And so even if they get squished, there's nothing that is getting hurt as such. It is, of course, a pity that an organism that is so useful is just, becoming chutney on the road. But another part is that it is something that in Hindi that Baba calls Svedaj, which is it is something that can regenerate from its own bodily cells. Like it doesn't have to sexually reproduce to
acha.
form the next generation. So if you even take the chutney of earthworm and put it in your
Oh,
garden, उसमें से ही पैदा हो जाएंगे based on,
oh, so
if it has enough.
they're not animals. They are animals,
Yeah,
but
they are,
they're
but
like,
different
they have
kind.
no feelings. They have no feelings.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but if you chop a earthworm, it will pain him, no?
Huh?
If earthworm gets chopped, it pains.
So pain नहीं, उसके अंदर it has pain receptors, but it doesn't have a receiver in the sense that it is this Svedaj are these transitory organisms between the biological world
An
and the
animal.
animal world where the Jeevan is running the body. So there's no Jeevan running the earthworm's body, but it does have pain receptors because it is a body that is developing to, it's moving towards a body that can
Evolve.
actually be run by a
Evolve.
Jeevan. So it's one
Oh
of those
God.
stages. In between
So
stages, they're
how did
both.
you say this? Because Babaji is spoken like this.
And you can also experiment and do it actually. You can take the um, dried up or the squished up earthworm, put it in an environment, and eventually you'll have many more earthworms
Hmm.
like that.
Sure. How squished can it be?
You can even powder it apparently. I have not tried
And they
that.
come get back to life.
If it has the right moisture and the right environment.
Acha.
Like
So all
it
the
will
ones
not be
on the
that
tree,
it will not be that earthworm. There'll be more earthworms like it's like seedlings,
parts of his bodies will produce,
like mold.
like one seed can produce something. No, no. Seeds, one
Huh,
seed produces.
basically like that. It acts like a seed.
Sure. The news.
Yeah.
Suddenly I stopped feeling bad for them.
Huh. So all of this, understanding the different types of organisms, their different roles in the
Hmm.
ecosystem, all of that helps our imagination then figure out how to work with them
Yeah.
and what to feel bad for and what not to feel bad for also.
Yeah. So snails and all come in that category.
Yeah, snails also.
Hmm.
Snails,
And
leeches.
what about those? What about those ones? Patanga. I mean, what the one that comes in the light and dies and all.
That I
One.
don't know about the regeneration bit. I do know that
Acha, acha, acha. Hmm.
the ones that depends on how evolved they are. I think the simpler ones don't have Jeevan, but the larger, more complex ones could. They have to have Saptadhatu and they should be able to recognize human input. So if they're not like usually kept as pets, then most likely they are not. They're not run by Jeevans.
Okay.
They're like certain tests, and I have not really explored it with different animals.
ठीक है.
So this is a very interesting aspect actually. Because we do all these things anyway in our life. No, we are imagining like I have to take care of the wooden furniture in our house is going bad, old stuff. So how to maintain it and how will it be in line with natural systems and things like that, and people and societies and traditional crafts and things like that are an interesting aspect of our imagination.
Mm.
And what is that imagination being governed by?
Mm. What does it mean by governed by? Means in what way?
So
Your desire to know. It's just your creativity with furniture. No, I guess that would be.
no, for instance, I may want to do it in a sustainable, natural manner, but if I don't have the know-how, if I don't know say, I have some old furniture which has mildew inside it. The cupboard has a lot of mildew. Now, for anyone to be able to use it and for it to not just rot and become waste, I need to get rid of the mildew. But I don't know how to get rid of the mildew without harming the wood. So then I have to find out how that is done. There are people who have worked on that. There are some ways of doing it naturally, and then there are some ways of doing it unnaturally. And unnaturally are things that are
Chemicals.
toxic in how they are produced, and toxic when they are used, and toxic when they decompose or degrade also over time. So I don't want to use that. I want to use the natural methods. But then I have to find out, I have to study what people have already recognized about the laws behind that system of how wood reacts with what substance. Then how to preserve wood, and how far should it be preserved with what materials. There are lots of options in that also. There are oils and there is wax and there is shellac and resins and things like that. And of course, there are all the synthetic ones also. Then should I do it myself, or should I have someone come and do it? Someone, who practices this, who has been doing this for generations and knows how to do it. But most people now are using chemical substances and they have forgotten how to do it naturally. So then to choose natural substances versus, keeping alive or supporting a good craft, which is woodwork, to give support to that sort of thing. So our imagination, despite our desires, our imagination can only work to the extent that we have an understanding of all the pieces of the puzzle. Then when we understand all of them clearly, then we're able to fit them in a nice and efficient and creative manner. But for that, we need to have an understanding of each element of that picture. So, the nature of, for instance, this is a very small example, the nature of wood, the nature of organisms that grow on wood and their role in nature, the nature of traditional handicraft or traditional crafts, people and their communities, their social situation, the production systems of all these synthetic chemicals, and how bad are they, and to weigh it out right now, which is the better option, things like that. These are all things that, despite my desire to be sustainable, to actually be sustainable, I need to understand all of these.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. And anyone else?
Thank you.
Okay.